Okay, good morning. Good morning. Hemshech, Tafresh Sadik Daled, 5694, page 55. So we're in the middle of discussing Ratzon, the two levels of desire. One is what we call Ratzon Mamish, an actual desire, which means an actually being drawn to, from the word sined, a channel, being drawn to and pursuing the desired objective. And a deeper or a higher level of Ratzon that's more removed from the objective, and he's calling it Machshava. Why? Because it's not an active pursuit. So machshava, it's a thought, it's a full thought in the sense of you made an absolute determination and resolve that this is worthy to be desired, but as he called it, machshava kara. It's cool and collected, similar to intellect compared to emotions. So you can be absolutely certain about something intellectually, but that still doesn't mean you're getting excited about it or that you're emotionally involved in any personal relationship with the thing that you see as so valuable or beloved, or the opposite, something so threatening or destructive, as we said earlier. So he called that, and he added what we learned yesterday was that in machshava, since we're calling it machshava is a garment, and the garment is commensurate to the thing that is dressing up. So if it's a garment to emotions, in other words, your thought, how to implement and how to actualize, let's say, the emotion of love. So since the emotion is warm, so the garment is also, machshav is also a warm thought, so to speak. And if it's a garment to something that is more reserved or more aloof or more detached or what we call cool, in the sense that it is not emotionally and passionately involved in the process, then he said, "Machshavu hikara." I'm reading the middle of page 55. It's not at all in the domain, in the realm of excitability or excitement and emotion. And he said, "V'chein hu b'ratzon," as it is with emotions and thought. The same thing, ratzon hazeh. It's also with this desire, this level of desire we're talking about. It's only a resolve and a determination in thought. That's where we stop. So we'll continue from there. Omnom is a qualification usually. Let's see where he goes with this. Omnom, however, meaning what we derive from all this. What do we learn from all this? What do we conclude? What do we summarize from all this? What do we derive from all this is actually the best translation. From what we derive from all this, we understand oid hefresh. Another difference, bein haheskim v'rotzon goli. We now, through what we've just discussed, we come away with yet another difference between the heskim, which we said the determination, the first level of desire called machshava, the ratzon goli. And now he's calling it ratzon goli. That was one of the names he used for it earlier. A revealed, meaning a revealed active desire, shehu hevdel ikri, which is a fundamental and primary difference. So now he's going to introduce another difference that we derive from everything we just learned. For who? And this difference is the harotzon hagolei, the revealed desire, hainu, harotzon shemuhus mitziyusei hu hamshachas hanefesh. Now he's saying he's actually equating the two. Earlier we were discussing, are they two different levels in the revealed rotzon? Could it be revealed and not yet being pursuing? Here he says it's clearly the same. He says clearly, he says this ratzon goli, this revealed desire, which is hainu, which means the desire that Mahus Mitziyuse, remember we kept talking about his personality. What is the personality of this level of Ratzon Mamish or Ratzon Goli? What is his personality? Not just Mitzias, not just that you know that you have a desire. What is his personality? Is that it's Hamshachas HaNefesh. It's the drawing of the soul, the pursuit of the soul, the inclination. We learned Hatoya, Hamshacha. They're all correct words. It's an active Ratzon. It's not dormant, and it's not just a resolve that sits and is not pursuing anything. It's Hamshachas HaNefesh. It's the nefesh being drawn, the nefesh extending, you can say, the extension of the nefesh, of the spirit of the human being. He's now adding some words and explaining. So what's the difference when the nefesh in the Ratzon Gali and before the Ratzon Gali? Before the desire is active, then it's in a state of a medes batzmusa. The nefesh remains standing. Standing doesn't mean standing. It remains stationary in its core essence. So he's saying, from being in a state of a stationary state, this Ratzon Gali is the nefesh being drawn out and pursuing whatever the objective of the desire is. And when it was Medes Batzmusa, let's continue. We're talking before it was drawn out, before this second Ratzon became active. What was going on? It was in the state of a Medes Batzmusay. It was stationary in its core essence. It was removed. Mufshetes means abstract, literally, but it also means remove. Mufshetes means, literally, mufshetes can be unclothed or removed. Usually you say, Peshet levush, levish levush. When you dress up in a garment, you're dressing. Peshet means you're undressing. So pshita, in halbasha and hafshata are two states. One is you're manifesting, and one is you're stepping back. Well, here it's not stepping back. He says when the soul was in its own core essence, before the desire became active in pursuing the objective, it was mufshetes mishum davar. Mufshetes means removed from, untethered by anything. These are all correct words. Mufshetes means removed from. Now this Ratzon, now go back to the whole reading of it. The whole reading of this. That's Mufshetes from just the Yesnim Sheches, Lemhus v'Dovar Zulosa. So now this Ratzon has brought it to be drawn to Mahus v'Dovar Zulosa, to another state out Zulosa, outside of or besides the actual nefesh. So I'm going to read the sentence again, but basically he's explaining what we learned already earlier, but he's saying it in more words. He's saying the nefesh means the soul, everything starts from the soul. Remember, Ratzon is just a desire of the soul. Ratzon is not a power of its own. It's a koyach hanefesh. However, it's not a koyach pnimi, meaning it's not a specific faculty that has a local, like let's say the power of intelligence or the power of sight. It's a koyach makifi, it's a koyach that reflects what the soul wants. But before this Ratzon, before you have this active desire, we learned, yes, you've made a determination, but the determination sits in a stationary state. He's saying, what does this Ratzon do? This Ratzon takes from how it is a Medes Batzmusa, where it's removed from anything, and now the soul is drawn to something, to an entity, and it's something that is out zulasa, relating to something else. Zulas means another, relating to another. So as long as the Ratzon was the higher level of Ratzon, it was not relating to another. It determined that this is a good thing. Like we said, it's a determination. Relationship, just like when it comes to Seichel and Midas that we discussed earlier. Seichel is not a relationship yet. Seichel is an understanding. The mind appreciates and has come to the conclusion that something is good or something is not good. Midas is a relationship. It's an emotional relationship. The same thing in Ratzon. The first level of Ratzon is just a resolve. And the second level of Ratzon is taking the soul and is drawing, it's this, I should say, not taking the soul. The soul, through that desire, is being drawn to pursue And that's a relationship to Muhus v'Dover Zulasa, to another. Which in other words is what we're going to be talking about, the two levels of Ratzon, one that relates to existence and one that does not relate to existence. Even though it's a determination, but it's not actively relating yet, as we discussed at length in the previous classes. Okay, so reading the full sentence now goes like this. He's going to explain another difference between the two desires. He says, Vuhu. What is it? He says, this difference is that I know how Ratzon Shemhus Mitziyusei, the lower level of Ratzon. The Ratzon, whose personality is such that it's Hamshachas HaNefesh, it's the drawing, the extension of the soul from being Miyesei Medes Ba'atzmusa, from being in a stationary state in its core state. In that state, it was completely removed from everything. It was removed, not completely. It says mufshetes b'shum davar, removed from anything. Liyes, now it's turning in, becoming nimsheches lemuhuz v'davar zulasa. It's being drawn and extending to a personality, to muhus and davar zulasa. It's just interesting. He uses the word muhus because he wants to say it's not just being drawn to an object; it's being drawn to another state of being. The rotzen in the atzmus hanefesh. Or rather, the Atzmus HaNefesh it's its own state of being. It's not relating to another state. And here it's relating now and being drawn to and extending toward another state of being. Both in the human being, and of course, Lamaila is also that way in the second level of Ratzon. Somebody wants to ask something or comment? Somebody wants to say anything? Okay. Hainu. And what is this Dover Zulasa? What is this other state? Hadover Shureitzabai. The item or the object that he desires. The object in which he desires. That's what this Ratzon does. This Ratzon Goli draws, the Nefesh is drawn to the thing it desires. Mashen came beheskim. Now he's going back to the other one, in contrast. In contrast, you can say, the Heskim, in the other level of Ratzon, which is only the determination or resolve, Hine, kishanefesh maskemes, sheroy lirtzes. When the nefesh agrees, the word really shouldn't be agrees, it's when the Resh determines, is the correct translation here. Sheroy lirtzes, that it's worthy to desire something. Remember, there was a shakal v'tarya, whether it is worthy or not worthy, and so on. But now it's determined. Absolute determination, Sharei Lirtzes, Bedovar Pleni. It's worthy desiring in whatever some Pleni means any item or any objective. Hine Adayin ein muhusan nimsheches leisei dover. Klal. It's resolved, but its muhus of the nefesh is not drawn at all to that object or to that objective. Rakshu haskama batzmusa. It's only a determination, a resolve. Batzmusa, in its core essence, that this thing is worthy to desire.
It's the Mehusa Metzias of the Ratzon is being drawn to the Mehusa of the Davar Acher. That's what it seems to be. That's what it seems to be pointing out.
I don't even know what you mean by that.
No, everything has a Mehusa Metzias. We described that the Ratzon has a Mehusa Metzias. It says that the Ratzon, the Mehusa Metzias, was drawn to the Mehusa of the other object.
But let me explain something. This is not semantics, because he uses the word Mehus. That's why I use the word. Mehus means a personality.
Yeah.
It means the personality. What he's basically saying, the nature and personality of desire, this level of desire, is that it's drawn to another state of being. I would not equate these two muhusas. He's just saying it's drawn to another state of being. Because he's not talking about Metzias HaRatzon. He says, this Ratzon Goli, what is its personality like that is drawn? And what is it drawn to? The muhus of something outside of it. So I'm not sure how it helps to say that. But regardless, I mean, at least in understanding, it's in the words, yes, he's using the word mohus. He's not just saying the mitzias of another thing. He says the muhus. Fine. As I said before, that it's another state of being. It's not just being drawn to a mitzias. If that's what you mean, that's fine. But I don't know if it's connected to the two muhusas are connected.
Okay. Okay.
Yes, but the bottom line is the Ratzon, yes, the muhus of the mitzias of the Ratzon, in the case of Ratzon Goli, is being drawn to the muhus, not just to the existence of something, to the muhus of it. So you could say those, but remember, it's not the muhus of the Ratzon, it's the muhus of the mitzias of the Ratzon.
Exactly.
So,
right. Yeah. Okay.
Because the muhus of the Ratzon could be the higher Ratzon, the Heskim, which I'm not sure about. He hasn't said enough to tell us that. So I'm not sure. But let's go back. So what did he say right now? So he said the Heskim, however, it's not being drawn at all. What's bothering me is he just said this is a new difference. Didn't we say this already? We more or less said this earlier.
I think that he does not mean this. This is only an introduction to the
Okay, let's see.
Heskem.
Let's see. There is one thing he did add that is not said before. He didn't talk about the nefesh before. Now he's talking about the nefesh. But let's continue reading and let's see what he's. But correct. Let's finish. I don't want to come to any conclusion. Okay. So what does he say now? Okay. So there's a determination, but ein mechusa nimshach le'esei davar. The nefesh, mechus of the nefesh, is not being drawn, is not extending to that thing at all. It's only a determination in its core essence that this thing is worthy of being wanted, like we said before, moichin compared to midas. Yeah. The eina elo, this heskim level, this determination level, is only mashanasa sheirish umokir lerotzen haba b'meshech hazman. So what is it? What is it? We know it's a determination. He says it becomes a sheirish, a root and a source for the rotzen haba, the meshech hazman, to the rotzen that will arise or emerge in a matter of time, in a period of time, which is what the rotzen that is drawn. So he's not saying there's no relationship between the two. As we learned earlier, there's a relationship, but they're different states. One is a determination that remains in the core essence of the person. We said it could also go years that nothing happens. It could also be forever that nothing happens. But when something does happen, this is the root and source. If you didn't have that determination, you wouldn't come to the next Ratzon, which is the active Ratzon to pursue it, as we discussed earlier. Omnom. I'm not sure what you mean. I think he's finished with the difference. Now he's going to speak how the etzem, the Ratzon, the higher Ratzon is also not etzem hanefesh. So I'm not sure.
If he's finished, then you're right with your question. What kind of...
So I have an answer. I think what he's adding here is the nefesh, whether the nefesh is being drawn. I think that's what he's adding here, because he wants to say, remember, in the big picture of things, what is the point of all this? If you remember, this is all about the interface. How much of a relationship is there between God, the creator, and us? And a relationship. Not that God wants creation. We know that. Nesava Kadosh Baruch Hu, so we know God has a taiva for existence. That's not a question. The question is, how much of a commonality is there? That's a better word. Is there a relationship? Or is it only that God wants? I don't say want is not the right word here. Nesava, that God has a taiva, a pleasure in it, whatever word you use. But if it was just nesava, as I explained from the Sikh in Shmois, Chelik Vav, look at the Sikhs. That could be not a relationship. God desires existence, and that's that. And we are like servants that have to listen and follow what God wants of us. But there's no, like I've spoken them many times, you could have a master and a servant. The master wants the servant to serve him. But the servant has nothing in common with the master. Doesn't have to understand him, doesn't have to love him. Doesn't have to connect with him. Just follow orders. But the Eibishter wanted a relationship. That's why Matan Torah is called a marriage. Chasanot, Yom Chasanos is a Matan Torah. And it says, V'ahavtas Hashem Elokecha. And v'yadaita es Hashem Elokecha. V'yadaita Ayin Beis levavecha ki Hashem Elokim. Know, love, feel, yira, awe, and on and on. So where's their commonality? So the Eibishter made it that there is. I'm not just Nesave, I've also manifested Eir. Eir reflects me. I'm speaking the name of God now, okay, if I may. And then in the Eir, I desired you, a Ratzon, and Ratzon was born. A Ratzon that first was just a determination. So, but something was aroused. I say to this. Something stirred, but that's still in a state of stationary state. It's not moved. And then there's a Ratzon that Meshach Hazman in the human beings. In God, we don't say time, but then there's a stage where it becomes actively pursuing and therefore relating to existence. So if you think of it that way, what I think he's adding here in the distinction, what he said, Hevdel Ikri, is what is happening with the nefesh. Until now, we were talking mostly about the Ratzon itself. Is the Ratzon removed or not removed from the object? So in the Heskim or the Machshave, it's removed. And in the active Ratzon Golei, Ratzon Mamish, it's actively pursuing it. Fine. But what about the nefesh? Where in the Nimshal, the nefesh would be godliness. What about the Eir Atzmi, or even higher? Let's talk about the Eir Atzmi. So I think that's what he's adding here. In the first one, in the lower Ratzon, it's the Etzem HaNefesh is now being drawn out to the objective. And in the first Ratzon, determination was made in the Atzmuse, but it remains there. So the Etzem essentially remains still detached. I think that's what he's adding, because that he did not say explicitly earlier. Now, maybe there's more. I have to read it again. Maybe the fact is, when we explained it earlier, maybe we understood it that way. Maybe he didn't say it also specifically. But it seems to be Hevdel Ikri, because it's relevant. We need to know what's going on with the Etzem HaNefesh in this whole thing, because you want to know the relationship, not just with the desire, with the Baal HaRatzon, the one who desires it. So now we have like two relationships, so to speak. One is a determination, so it's really more still in the Etzem Ha'ir, I would say, the Etzem of the Nefesh. And then there's how the Etzem is actually being drawn and relating to the objective. Yeah, I'm almost sure that's the pshat here, because now you'll see the Omnam comes now the other way around and says, Omnam, la'acher kol zeh. After all this, where we made such a big fuss about how the higher desire is so removed and detached and aloof from the object of the desire. Nevertheless, after all this, hinegam heskem zeh, even this determination, hu yirida legaba atzmus hanefesh. It's also a yirida. Not only the second level of Ratzon, which is extending and being drawn to and pursuing the objective, but even the determination is a yerida, legaba atzmus hanefesh. It's a descent. It's a lower state. Kamoishi torim shenase bo heskem hazeh. In relation to the way it was before this determination happened. So in other words, there's a state before you made that determination. Remember, that came after Hesedus. You were inspired, and you came to a shakavitayim. You came, yes, this is worthy, and I have a resolve and determined this is worthy to be desired. However, you're not pursuing it. So he's saying even the determination is at a lower level than the Atzmus HaNefesh itself. That's why I'm convinced that that's what he brought in the Hevdel. He wanted to first say that the two levels of Ratzon each relate to the Etzem in a different way. One is the desire of the Etzem, but it remains in the core state. And the second is the desire as it extends and relates to the other. Now he's saying then there's the Etzem that doesn't even have the resolve. which of course is very relevant to the nimshal for sure. And that's why I think that's the picture here. So back and forth in this interface relationship. Yeah, the kodim aheskim, before this determination was made, harihoyse bat smusa mamash. I pointed out many times he uses mamish and sometimes not mamish. Mamish and not mamish means totally, entirely. Sometimes we don't say mamish, you say it's bat smusa. It relates more to the etzem, but mamish means that before the determination was made, what do you have? Only atzmus hanefesh. There's not even the gilui. There's not even the revelation and expression of a desire altogether. So level 1 of Ratzon, even though it's removed, but it's still an act. It's an active Ratzon. When I say active, I don't mean actively pursuing, but active as a desire. You made the determination, a very clear. Let's go back to the example with the artist. There's the artist before he even thinks or knows he's an artist. Then he becomes aware of that. And then he desires, he makes a determination, he's going to create art. It may take 20 years till he does so. So the artist, before he made that determination, was there, but he's in this pure essential state, and it's not yet in any form a desire to create art, even if you're not pursuing it, is still a specific desire. So therefore, compared to that, so therefore, even the higher Ratzon or Machshava, or whatever we call Koyecha Ratzon, Ratzon Hanelam, Heskim, the determination is also a step below the Atzmus HaNefesh, which is Atzmus HaMamish. Umufshetes.
And therefore wouldn't be any weaker than either level would have the same strength and impact.
Who says that? Where are you getting that from? Absolutely not. I would say not the case at all.
Okay. Why?
Because it has to go through stages. Why would you say that even? I'm saying, where did you get that from here?
Ratzon is takif. Even the Machshavas.
But you know, you're processing here, and this is not pshat in this mimer here. Anyway, let me continue reading. I don't see anywhere where he's even talking about the etzem. He's just saying now, there's the lower level of Ratzon, there's the higher level of Ratzon, there's the etzem HaNefesh.
Okay.
3 levels.
Sounded like you were presenting that idea. My apology. Okay.
Umufshetes umushleles mishum davar zulasa. And this atzmusa mamish, before you even made the determination, it's mufshetes. Again, he uses mufshetes, but this time it's a far more mufshet. Before he used mufshet, that the Ratzon, the determination is separate from the object. Now he's saying mufshet is mufshet umushleles. It's separate from, or mufshet means removed from. Umushleles, and completely negates, and completely is negated from mishum davar zulasa, for anything outside of itself. So even the first level of the Heskim it's removed from that as well. And he's going to say, "V'lo hoya afilu mokir lamshacha v'hatoya le'ezer davar zulasa." And it's not even a mokir. You can't even call it a source to being drawn and extending to anything outside of itself. The Ratzon, the Heskim, the higher level of Ratzon, is true, is not pursuing and not active. But it's a source. He said it's a sheirish mokir for the next Ratzon. Because you have been stimulated and inspired. I want a home, or I want to create art, and I know it's worthy. You're not necessarily pursuing it, but you have now established a Ratzon. It's like, for the record, something's been established, a determination. It may take meshech zman, it may take years, it may take months, it may take a day, it may take whatever it takes, but something has happened. Now that is a mokir for the next state, which actually pursues that desire and that objective. The atzmusa is not even in a state of any determination. So it's mufshetas or mufshlelas from anything outside of it, and you can't even call it a source. which if you again, let's go back to the interface discussion. So now you have actually a third level where you see a level that's completely removed. So very much in the nimshal, in the moral with Elikus, it's completely the divine. And then you have the divine manifesting in a desire. So it doesn't have a relationship with existence, but it is going to be the source of the desire that does have a relationship with existence. And then you have the Ratzon Gali. So that's what Atzmusa is. It's removed even from that initial desire. That's why I gave the example with the artist. It makes it a little easier to understand. Mashenkin aheskim. That's the atzmus. That's the core soul. Mashenkin. In contrast, the heskim, the determination, which is the higher level of rotzen, hu heirodas hamuhus. Heirodas hamuhus. It's bringing down. Heiroda means this. Like you read it from the word you read it, bring it down. It draws down the muhus of the nefesh, liyes mischaber luzalosa, in order or that it should attach or connect to another. So the heskim is the beginning of the process of connecting to another, is the determination that that's what you want to do, but it's not the active pursuit of it. Now he's going to qualify the other way around. So why is it not then like Ratzon Gali? It says, however, it's not like Yiridus HaMohus that becomes an actual palpable Ratzon that's drawn and pursued. So it's a Yirida into the state of a determination. So it's the beginning of a relationship in concept, but not in actuality, because the other next level of Ratzon and it's not like the next level which brings it down into an actual Ratzon. She'oz, in that third state, hu hatoyev ha'amshocha mamish le'isei hadavar. It's being the drawn and being inclined or drawn or pursuit for the Eisei Dover, for the object of the desire. Mashenkin by Heskim, but by contrast, the Heskim, the determination, she'ena nimshach hadayin lirtzes. It's not yet drawn to desire. It's roi lirtzes. You come to the determination that it's worthy to desire, but it's not in the active state of the tzinor, of the channel. So it's basically more like I said, conceptual. It's the right thing to do, but it's not an active state of actually pursuing. It's only a determination in this core that it's worthy to desire, that this is a worthy thing. And now the Frierdiker Rebbe, in his own poetic way, says, now after all this, at the end of all of this, the conclusion of all of this, this desire, this Ratzon Heskim determination is an interface between the core of the spirit or the soul and the revealed Ratzon that is drawn to the objective. So the Kekles Hakel, the way I would interpret it is that he's summing up essentially everything he's saying. That on one hand, it's higher and removed from the revealed and active desire. To the point he didn't even want to call it Ratzon, he called it Machshav. On the other hand, it's not the Etzem Mamish, because Etzem Mamish is not even in a state of determination. And here, so it ends up being an interface. You see clearly the word Mamutza, the interface between the two. Because in order to get from the Etzem HaNefesh to an active pursuit, first you need to determine that it's the right thing, that it's worthy. That's the logical process, how we work. And this is also how God chose to manifest in all these levels of Ratzon. Okay. So we finished chapter 16. Before I continue,
Koidem haheskem, it's
just for the
not
record, by the
even
way,
Ratzon.
one second. Just for the record, all this is chapter 65 in Ayin Beis. Almost all this that we just read, with a few additions of the Frierdiker Rebbe. Go ahead. What do you want to ask?
Koidem haheskem, it's not even Ratzon.
Absolutely not. That's what he said. Is it the level of Ratzon Hamuchled Batzmusay that he spoke about earlier, Ratzon Atzmi? Maybe. But it's definitely not a Ratzon that has any consciousness or any determination. It's not a Heiserus yet. If you read back there, the Ratzon Atzmi, let's say, of a father, of a parent, a child, and God to the Neshamas, he said, it's Atzmi, you're wired that way. It has nothing to do with an active desire altogether. I'm not saying that's what he's referring to here, because he doesn't mention it. But even if you want to say that, even if you want to talk about the Ratzon Hamuchot on page 53, where in the top of the page he spoke about Ratzon Atzmi, and lower he spoke about, and he said clearly, we're not discussing it here. Remember that. He keeps saying this is not the discussion here, the Ratzon Hamuchot Batzmusay. He even said, Slichim li'Yisrael, you have to be careful not to mix the two. Those are the words of the Frierdiker Rebbe. La'ariv Ratzon Hamuchot Lazeh, Ratzon Hamuchot Hamavur b'Makom Acher. So, but if you want to talk about that, that is definitely in the category more of an atzmusay than in. But here clearly he's speaking atzmusay. He's not really mentioning that. Even if you talk about Ratzon Hamuchel Batzmusay, at the end of the day, it's not really a Ratzon. You only use it as a Shem HaMushal. It's only a borrowed term, meaning to say that there is a fundamental wired desire, the love of your child, but it's not an active Ratzon. You're not aware of it necessarily. It's not in a state of determination. It's not in a state of pursuit. It could. Now, can you explain that the Ratzon Hanelim, is it rooted in the Ratzon HaMuchlet? In those Maimorim, I mentioned Samach Gimel and Tofshin Gimel. I made a mistake. It's Samach Hey. The Hemshech of Rosh Hashanah Tofrei Samach Hey. And the Hemshech of Rosh Hashanah Tofshin Gimel discusses. And yes, it does discuss that, but it's not what he wants to address here for whatever reason. So I'm just pointing that out.
If you want to say that it's rooted, it's only in Eifen von Yechoiles, I am right?
But I just said that the Frierdiker Rebbe said these words, L'chein tzrichim lihizoher, shaloi la'arav Ratzon Hamuchlet hazeh. So clearly they don't want to talk about this, and you want to?
No, my question is, the Ratzon HaMuchlet hazeh is the Ratzon Hanelam.
Which hazeh? I don't know what you mean by hazeh. Which hazeh?
He's talking here, the
The
Heskem.
Heskem and Hachlata?
Yes, is the Ratzon
That's
Hanelam.
called Ratzon Hanel. That's called Ratzon Hanelim or Koyach HaRatzon. Yeah. Yeah. Remember, the whole thing began, there's two levels of Ratzon, he said. If you go back on page, top of page 52, what did he say? Yes, Ratzon Yesh Beis Madreges. Ratzon Hanelim v'Ratzon HaGoli. Agav, he mentioned that there's another Ratzon HaMuchlet Batzmusay. So you could relate that to Atzmus HaNefesh, but since he's not discussing it, I don't know if we have to go there. Does it help understand the whole picture? Probably at some point. But right now he wants to focus on these two levels of Ratzon. But Pashto is because we're talking about the two levels of Ayin and the Oir. So he's keeping focused on that, on those levels. But for the record, yes, there's a Ratzon HaMuchel Batzmusay, but that's Koydem Eiserus. There's no stimulation, there's no consciousness. It's there, part of the wiring of the Etzem HaNefesh. There is such a thing. And I'm saying in those Maimorim, it talks that is the root of everything. However, at this point, he wants to make it clear that Atzmus HaNefesh is not even a mocker for the Ratzon HaGoli, because it's completely removed. So we have the Atzmus HaNefesh, Ratzon Hanelim, which is the Heskem, the determination, and the revealed Ratzon, which is the active pursuit and relationship with another. Okay? And the middle Ratzon, the middle level Ratzon Hanelim is an interface between the core soul and the active pursuit and the relationship with the objective, that the desired objective. Okay? So we'll move on, chapter 17, bottom of page 55. Vihine. I'm just looking ahead. We don't have much more. There's going to be a few more pages before we get back to Ayin Beis. But fine, it's all part of the explanation. And I'm keeping connecting. I keep connecting to the, remember, this is all coming to explain the ayin, that's a mamutza between Yesh Amiti and Yesh Hanivra. So part of the process is understanding the desire, the levels of how God relates to existence. So we have three ways that he relates or doesn't relate. I thought somebody was going to ask this question, if I may. He explained that when the Atzmus HaNefesh, the core spirit or soul, is on its own, it's removed from any form of desire and determination even. Clear. Then it turns into a Ratzon HaMuchlit, which means a Hechlet and Heskem, a determination. Then it becomes actively pursuing the thing it determined was worthy of wanting, actually pursuing, being drawn to it. Okay? So the question I would pose is this. Once you have the Ratzon HaGoli, what is the Etzem HaNefesh now relating to whatever it is that you want? Because if it isn't, then it seemingly defeats the purpose. You want to have a relationship with the core that desired all of this. So in other words, what is the difference then? Once you're actively pursuing the relationship with the object of what your desire is, the Ratzon Goli, what happens with the Ratzon Hanelam and what happens with the Etzem HaNefesh? Are they still completely detached? Or is the Ratzon Goli now revealing the Etzem and the Ratzon, the Heskem, and in this relationship? Does it become part of the relationship? Now we understand on its own, it's not part of a relationship because it's removed from relationship. But once you do have the relationship, let's put it in, I'll put it in marital terms, in marriage. We're talking about a healthy, functional human beings. They both are born, B'Tselem Elokim, divine image. We know Zocher Nekeva Baraisam, so there'll be, the completion of them will be when they're with each other. Because God separated Zocher Nekeva, male and female, but together they're part of one divine image. And they're drawn to each other and they will connect and become like one and back to that Tselem Elokim, the complete Tselem Elokim. But at the same time, each of them is a full intact individual. They're strangers actually, born in different families, don't know each other, have different personalities. Not just different families, male and female are fundamentally very, very different. I'm sure you'd all agree. Okay, now they connect. They have a relationship. They've chosen, let's say it goes through all these levels. The etzem, determination, and now you've pursued. Ish darke lichbesh, the man pursues, and they agree, they get married. Is their relationship only in the level of Ratzon Goli, in the pursuit level? Or is the etzem HaNefesh of theirs also connected to each other? Because if you say the etzem is not involved, that they're only connected on, I don't want to say superficial level, but more on an outer level, Ratzon HaGoli, then the relationship is not complete. Or do you say, and this is what I would suggest you say, is that the relationship is with all levels. There's only a difference in how you relate on all levels. If you're talking Ratzon Goli, there the relationship is very actively commensurate. You could have, they talk to each other. They're able to give and take, appreciate each other. In a very revealed, conscious way, the relationship is very active. On the Ratzon Hanelam level, it's not as conscious, but there's still a connection. The connection, however, is more each one has a unique personality, so you respect it. I don't understand you completely on that level, but there's still respect. So there's a connection, but the connection doesn't have to be that I have to relate to you. You know, if your wife or husband asks you to do something, or they have a certain preference, so at times you actually share preference. And you say, great, I love that. Let's do it together. At times you may not relate, but because there is a connection and that person has something deeper in their, let's call it level of determination that you don't fully necessarily relate to. So there's still, but the connection is not necessarily one where you have to understand each other. And then there's the atzmus hanefesh, where there it's completely the uniqueness that two people have that they may never be able to communicate in words or in feelings, but it's there. And the Eibishter blessed that when a couple comes together in a sacred way, they can connect, they become one flesh, can give birth to a child. It's all a mystery. And with a third partner, that doesn't mean they're not connected, just means who says connection has to be on your terms. So basically in the relationship, you could say there's three types of connections. One is on your terms and on the spouse's terms. They relate to each other on Ratzon HaGoli level. The second would be the Ratzon HaNelam. It's not on my terms, not on yours, but there's still something there that you can connect with, even though you may not fully understand. And then there's just a fundamental connection that has nothing to do with you at all. It's just a core connection that you have.
Yeah.
What happens when Tselem Elokim is reunited, as it was during when Hashem created it as oneness, and you just stand in utter bittul and awe of that reality. And it has nothing to do whether you understand it or not, or you relate to it or not. It's not about you. It's completely about the etzem of connection. And not because it's about the other. It's the chuppah. It's like, yeah, I think that would be a good way to explain. So I asked a question, I also gave an answer. So the same thing is with God. There are things we can relate to. Look, God says, you learn Torah, you're understanding me. So there's a relationship. Mahu chanun, afata chanun. Just as God is kind, you should be kind. Mahu rachum, atar. In other words, there's a relationship between our eser keiches, our faculties, and the divine attributes. We connect our chesed of a human being to chesed of Hashem. That's a relationship. I mentioned yesterday, you bench. Hashem provides life. And it's something we can relate to. Obviously, it's godliness as it manifests more in relationship with us. Then there's elements more like Seviv Kalam. It's more beyond us, but it's still Seviv Kalam. It's a makif, but it's not a makif that's completely removed. It has some connection to us. The artist has already made the determination he wants the art, but he's not manifesting in the details of the art. And then there's where you completely, the Eibishter is the key, and all you're doing is submitting yourself to something that's completely beyond. It's like the three levels, actually, this works very well. It's the three levels of Kesser that we learned in volume 1. Arich that relates, the lower level of Arich that relates to existence. That's Ratzon HaGoli. The higher level of Arich that is beyond, Makif. And the third, so the three interpretations in Kesser, one is like surrounds, one is a crown, and one is complete silence. Atik, or Primis Atik, is completely removed. But it doesn't mean there's no connection. It just means it's not a connection on our terms. Anyway, I'll tell you the truth. This is probably all going to be understood more when we learn further, because that's the whole point of the ayin, is meant to connect these different levels. But I could not resist, because since he mentioned Mamutza and Ratzon and so on, just to bring it all together, that's why the Ratzon is so vital in this whole discussion.
You're always emphasizing that this is the way how we are connected, even with Atzmus. Okay, he made oil, and then from oil we're coming to Ratzon. In Ratzon we have few dargis. That's the whole process. Of course, everything is rooted in the things up, like you said it now.
Yeah, but remember, we always want to have the relationship with God, but we have to remember we're not equals with God. We don't become God. We become connected with God. That's why it's very important to keep always emphasizing there's our identity, there's God's identity, and there's how we meet. That's why you need all these levels, because you need to meet somewhere. And it all comes down to where you stand in your life, you know?
We still said by that higher level, it doesn't have any relationship at all to something besides itself. And how does that fit in to what you're explaining now?
I just explained it.
I understand. I did that. Well, I didn't understand it. It said it's mishatus mishrelos mishum davers durasa.
So we completely surrender to it. In a relationship, you completely surrender to the fact that you're married to your spouse, and it makes no difference whether you understand it or whether you benefit from it or whether it's on your terms. You're completely bittul. It's total bittul to the etzem. In this case, I was talking about the Eibishter, but the same thing, I was giving an example in the human relationship. So there's things we relate to. There are things that we don't relate to, but we can appreciate and we have something in common.
Okay.
Like I said, you can connect to the artist as he's creating the art. That's Ratzon Gali. You connect to the artist that he made the determination to create art, but he's beyond you. And then there's how he is in his core essence. Your only relationship is complete surrender and bittul. It's not in your terms. That's the whole point. It's on God's terms. And you have to go through one level to the next before you get there. I tried to explain it in the context of a marriage, in a relationship where there are things you relate to, things that are beyond, but still some connection. Anyway, this goes back to the essential topic of the 3 levels of Keser that we learned in volume 1. And we're going to talk a lot more about this. I would say that you're not going to get to the level 3 if you don't get the first level 1 or 2. And frankly, there are even lower levels than this. This is still in Ratzon. We're not even talking Keches Pnimim. We're talking in Keser already, in Ratzon.
Problem is, we're all at level. We're all at the 3rd level, the upper level, with no relationship at all. That's where we're coming from.
No, but if you have a relationship on level 1 and 2, which also comes from God, it's the same God. Remember, God is one. There's no 3 gods. So you're forgetting. This is, again, not mathematical. I told you many times, if you think it's mathematical and technical, you're never going to get it. It's a relationship. If you have a relationship with your spouse on a basic level, that you could understand each other, you appreciate each other, that creates the keli then to have a relationship on an atzmizdika level. The problem is you're trying to understand it mathematically and scientifically. It'll never work. I said it 1,000 times. I keep saying it. As long as you go there and you don't use Aveda, it's never going to be understood. The fact of the matter is that when you connect to God on levels that you can connect it with your seichel, then you can connect on levels that are beyond your seichel. You can't jump without going one step at a time. It's like, are you going to appreciate your teacher, his whole depth, if you don't appreciate first the Aleph Beis he teaches you? No way. So the key to everything starts with you relating to it on your terms, the best way of your ability here. I can't undo how many of you learned Chassidus, but they taught it to us in the wrong way. They taught it mathematically and conceptually and abstract. And it's a bunch of levels. Okay, and then we have to figure out the mechanics. How do you get from here to here to here? It's not. It's a personal journey. It's a personal journey. You cannot reach 10 rungs up if you haven't climbed rung 1. So the first thing is creating a relationship that you can relate to. And then there's something above your head and above and above and above. And that's how we go. So I would look to find, if I was personally coaching you, I would say, let's find these 3 levels in your life. On your level, you don't have to do it on the highest level. On your life, all we want is Zusha to be Zusha. You don't have to be somebody else. What is B'chol Levavcha, B'chol Nafshecha, B'chol Meidecha in your personal life? What is things you relate to, things that are above you, but you could somewhat get a sense, and things that are completely beyond. And if you can personalize those 3 levels, and then you grow in each one, then I would say you're really living up to and fulfilling what the Rabbeim want with this Chassidus. That's what they want. If you're going to sit and try to mathematically say, okay, where do the levels fit and not personalize it, I'll tell you that I don't think you'll ever come to fully understand it, because it's much more experiential than it is intellectual. it's very deep and intellectual, and that's why there's a temptation to just turn it into a philosophy. But frankly, the most important part here is the actual journey. So you'll say, okay, I want to climb up to the top of Mount Everest. So I say, did you climb up a smaller mountain first? You want to go right up there? So on paper, what's the big thing? Here's Mount Everest, here's a smaller mountain, and on paper, you have it all figured out. But the fact is, it's not on paper. You cannot travel, you can't go 20 steps before you want to go one step. So it all comes down to, and you'd be surprised, you may think that you're a beginner and you're not shaykh. It's not true. I think all these three levels you can find in your life. I have no question in my mind. I gave the example in marriage, but the same thing is in other areas of life. So it's not about dismissing that we are Gashmizdika people. Everybody has levels they can reach that are accessible right now and that you can relate to, levels that are a little beyond you, and further and further. And the more you train yourself and condition yourself, the better you'll come to relate to these things. I don't think someone can understand.
During davening?
Let me just say this. Let me say this. Davening is exactly the place you do it. Exactly. That's 4 stages in davening is a 4-step journey. Let me just say this. If Atzmus decided, for whatever reason, they're creating a world like ours with a Seder Ishtalshlus, as we've talked many times, didn't have to do it this way. But he made it a whole hierarchy, a whole stepping stones, right? A ladder, right? And he said, I'm going to manifest in that way. Atzmus is Atzmus. We're not talking about that. But that says manifesting. Oir, higher levels of Oir, Rotzen, Ayin, Rotzen, lower level of Rotzen. Then comes Tzimtzum and Kav and Ishtalshlus and Elamus. So we may never understand why. We will never understand why. But you can rest assured this was not a sideshow. The whole Seder Ishtalshlus is the way to experience Atzmus, because Atzmus chose the Seder Ishtalshlus. So if he's manifesting a Seder Ishtalshlus, in some mysterious way, the Eibishter is telling us, when you climb from Asiya to Yitzira and to Bria and to Atzilus, or from Malchus to Yesod to Hoy to Netzach, etc., from Chochmah to Keser, the whole thing, you're climbing in a structure that Atzmus created. I am embedded in there somewhere. So when you learn one word in Torah, Kametz Aleph Ah, you could say, it's nothing. What's Kametz Aleph Ah? ABC, it's nothing. You're learning deep Chassidus, it's not true. When a child learns Kametz Aleph Ah, Atzmus is in that Kametz Aleph Ah. Because remember, from Atzmus' point of view, there's no difference between higher and lower. However, there's a difference. By us, there's a difference. So even when you're in your small little avodah, you do one gesture, one effort, one small mitzvah. I mean, there's no such thing as a small mitzvah, but you know what I mean. One small deed, you have Atzmus in there. He's embedded in the Ishtalshlus. Basically, he's saying, the Eibishter, is you climb on your terms, and you will have me that way. To the point that as you get higher and higher, you'll have me more revealed and more revealed, even on your terms. So the relationship begins from the second we're born, from the second a neshama exists. And then it comes down, what are we going to do? Not what Atzmus is going to do, what are we going to do? And if we climb, and each level has Atzmus embedded in there some way, then whether we know it or not, we're climbing and we're becoming more and more, if you want it, more godly. As we become more godly, K'doshim tiyu, ki kodesh ani. You shall be holy because I am holy. And slowly, you assimilate and you acclimate yourself to that holiness to the point that you become a keli to the higher levels of Oir and Rotzen and Oir Atzmi and all the way to Atzmus. So you're really connecting to Atzmus in every detail, but through Giluyim, we don't yet know it until we fully appreciate it. And Giluyim is when we really understand and relate to these higher levels. Without Giluyim, every mitzvah you do has all these levels in it. You're just not part of your consciousness and awareness. So we want 2 things here. We want to draw Atzmus into this, but we want to also, on our terms, that we can relate to it and appreciate it. And that's why you need the growth. I hope that helped.
It's nice, Yoshiko.
Okay.
Wish there was a little sign that when you reach Yitzira, say, you've reached Yitzira. We don't, I mean, the problem,
It's that, you know what? I think you could submit a write-in request to God. Maybe he'll, and maybe there are signs, but frankly, it's just we need to know how to read them. Why don't you say not just a sign, also a prize? You should get a prize when you get there, right?
Prizes
Okay.
itself.
Okay, we'll stop here. We finished at the chapter. Yeah, we finished chapter 16 at the bottom of page 55.